Okay, welcome to episode 47 of the iPad podcast. And this is Lexstar at maxfuture.com. And today is Sunday, March 27th. And of course, it's been another interesting and fascinating week in iPad world and all sorts of interesting things to talk about. And so let's start it. Let's go to the top stories. One of the most interesting stories came out today on March 27th. From somebody I read a lot of, and that's MG Siegler at TechCrunch. And he has a scoop regarding the next major update of iOS, which will be on the iPad and the iPhone and the iPod Touch. It's iOS 5. And his scoop is this. He's got sources. He says he's got two solid sources who say that iOS 5 will be announced by Apple in June at the WWDC event, but it won't actually be released until the fall. And that's sort of surprising because a lot of people in the past, the iOS devices would always get a new major operating release in like June when the new iPhones come out. So this would break a pattern, as he points out. And he also, well, here's the key news that he says that is very interesting for the iPad and iPad 2 and any iOS device. He says iOS 5 will launch in the fall and will be a major revamp of the OS. It could well be previewed at WWDC. It just won't be released then. The iOS 5 launch is also likely to coincide with the release of a new type of iPad, which TechCrunch previously reported on. The new iOS will be heavily built around the cloud, and we could see several new services launch from Apple that could take advantage of this. Yes, one of those is very likely a music locker service. There is also a full fall launch aimed for this during Apple's annual music-themed event. And he also goes on to say most of the cloud stuff will be first talked about at WWDC, which is the developers event in June. And one of the new cloud service elements is likely a location service that focuses on finding friends and family members. And also he says that OS X Lion, which is for the Mac, is going to be there for summer release. So this is all really interesting. I'm not surprised that Apple's pushing off the iOS 5 actual launch till the fall. And I'm not surprised if another iPad comes out. Remember, until the iPad 2 came out, there were all sorts of debates and leaked rumors that there was going to be another iPod version launched in the fall. And people were like, why would they do that? Well, I think it makes sense to do that because you have the big Christmas shopping season. And if you always have the iPad updated in the early spring, people may hold off in the Christmas shopping season because, like, let's look at people who bought the iPad 1 in late December. They must be feeling a little burned when on March 11th the iPad 2 comes out. So but I felt that Apple had to come out with the iPad 2 in March because of looming competition from, Samsung and HP and all those other competitors who are trying to launch iPad competitors. So Apple had to come up with the iPad 2 now, but Apple probably wants to go on a September update cycle for the iPad just because it's right before Christmas or maybe right before school starts because then people can get their new iPad as they go back to school. Or maybe Apple's going to a biannual hardware update of the iPad like the Macintosh. The Macintosh pretty much gets updated twice a year. And the iPad, in a way, is like a computer now, replacing a lot of Macintoshes. So the fall, it does make sense that there would be a fall release of the iPad. And there's reasons to put off iOS 5 until then. One reason is if you're going to have another launch of the iPad there with better hardware, you want to have a nice, cool new operating system. And another reason would be maybe iOS 5 is going to be packed with so many incredible features that Apple doesn't want to, wants to make sure that it's perfectly done. And so maybe there are some glitches, and additional time would give Apple chance to polish iOS 5. And maybe maybe you need to give developers a chance to catch up. So if you can't just release the iOS in June if you haven't given developers the heads up as to what's going to be in it. And so maybe what they're going to do is just really release iOS 5 as a beta for developers in June, and then launch it in the fall. So, now the cloud stuff, we've been hearing about this like for the last few weeks. And one rumor has it that if you go to the Mobile Me, you cannot sign up for a 1-year $99 plan anymore. And that's because the rumor is that Apple very soon is going to roll out a $25 annual fee to have a digital locker in the cloud where you're going to store your music and your content. Now, I don't know how Apple's going to do this. Apple hasn't announced anything, but there's a good chance the next version of the iOS is going to have more and more things that are cloud-based. I mean, some of the things that I would like to see is, well, I just like to see a lot of content stored in the cloud. Let's take iDisk. We have this iDisk service currently with Mobile Me, which is on, my iPad, my iPhone, and my Mac. But iDisk is not as elegant and it's not as open as Dropbox. And Dropbox, which is a cloud-based storage and syncing service, is fantastic. If you're a new purchaser of an iPad, you should really download the Dropbox app because it basically is like a program that creates a storage on your iPad, and they give you 2 gigabytes free, and it syncs with a folder on your computer. So if you put any files on your computer in a Dropbox folder, it syncs and is available in your iPad or your iPhone. So Apple needs to do something like that to, iDisk has to become more like Dropbox, and frankly, they should just buy Dropbox. And what Dropbox does that's incredible is that it's made it very easy for other developers and other programs to take advantage of Dropbox. So there's a number of apps like 1Password which use Dropbox's syncing so that the 1Password app that's on your iPad syncs with the 1Password app that's on your computer. What this means is you never really have to, connect your iPad to your Mac or Windows computer to sync 1Password. They're just through the cloud synced all the time. So it should be interesting. It's only good for any iPad or iPhone owner that iOS 5 is going to come out, and I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to wait till the fall. On the other hand, look, if you don't want to wait till the fall and you really want to play with iOS 5 if it comes out in a beta form in June, all you do is you pay $99 a year and join Apple's iOS developer program, and they give you the beta, and you can put it on your iPad. So if you want the iPad in June, if you want the iOS in June, just join the developers program. Okay, so the big news this week was that on Friday, the 25th, March 25th, the iPad 2 went on sale overseas, and Apple had its international launch. And, according to the electronista.com website, the iPad 2 lines for the international launch rivaled those in the United States. And, there were reports, they had reports from Sydney, Australia, which was one of the first to carry the iPad 2 outside of the United States, and the lines there ranged in the hundreds. In London, there were very long lines, and in Canada, there were long lines, and it makes sense. There's limited access to the iPad 2. They've only have so much in stock, so it makes sense that people are going to line up to get it. Now, apparently, the lines in London were really, really long, and this website called Only Gizmos had this really interesting video showing you just how long the line was at one of the London stores for Apple. Okay, so here's the video, and it really on YouTube on this Only Gizmos site, and it really shows you how long the line was in London. It just goes on and on and on. See, I mean, look, it's just it really is. It's amazing. It just the line keeps going, and it reminds me when I stood in line 2 weeks ago in Manhattan. And, I would say the line rivaled that in the West 14th Street Apple store. So, people will go to extreme lengths to get one of these iPads, including maybe standing in line 5 hours. And here, let's jump ahead, and we can see we're scrolling ahead. And wow, the line just keeps going and going and going. Look, I'm scrolling. It's 3 minutes of scrolling, and this guy with the camera, he's going way back in the line, and it just keeps going. The line just keeps going around and around the corner, and there were some who were in line for 17 hours, according to this story. So, it's very demanding. Now, by weekend's end, I mean, this is the 27th, so it's been on sale for 2 days. Electronista.com reports that many stores have run out of the iPad 2 in Canada and the UK. And, basically, the article says that international sales have been difficult to gauge, but a search of Pocket Lint found that all of London's Apple stores had run out. And, it's altogether selling in 23 countries, and it's unclear if it's going to be selling out everywhere. But I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't selling. I would be surprised if it isn't selling out because, the way demand is, people are selling this stuff overseas. I mean, people are waiting in line in New York so they can ship them and sell them for triple in China. So the people who are importing this stuff in China, they're going to know of countries where there's not a lot of demand, send people there to buy the iPads and ship them to China. So I expect every country to be sold out. Now, I guess it's good news for some people in the United States, but if you go to the Apple store in the United States, it looks like the iPad times for shipment have gone down. It was, I think, 4 to 5 weeks at some point. And now, if you look, it's 3 to 4 weeks on all the models. So it's coming down a little bit. It's still limiting you to 2 per order, but at least there's hope. My expectation is by end of April, we should start seeing shorter shipping periods and more availability. That's my guess. Now, some people say that, the iPad is not a content creating device, but there's a really colorful story on Cult of Mac about the launch of the iPad overseas. And in Germany, this article points out that there's a guy, a videographer named Richard Gutjahr, who used the iPad 2 in the field as a camera rig to cover the launch of the iPad 2, and he edited the movie and uploaded it directly from the iPad 2. And this guy, this journalist, Richard Gutjahr, he made headlines himself last year, according to the Cult of Mac article, as being the first guy in line for the original iPad at Apple's Fifth Avenue store. So let's take a look at his movie, which is on the website and also on YouTube, to see just to see how well the editing was. And look, it's not bad. I mean, look, he edited this all on the iPad 2. He shot it, and he's got graphics. He's got the iMovie graphics. Obviously, he edited in iMovie. Now, the one thing that iMovie doesn't have built into it is stabilization on the iPad. On the Mac's iMovie, you do have stabilization, and I expect as the iPad becomes more powerful, the more it gets more processors. Like right now, it's got dual-core processors on the iPad 2. The iMovie will get beefed up to do more powerful things that it can do on the Mac. And I bet you stabilization is one place it's going to go. Now, I pointed out on my blog, Google now on YouTube YouTube now online, if you upload a movie, and you can from iMovie, you can edit it online and add stabilization. But anyways, take a look at this article, this movie that this guy did. I mean, what's remarkable, he shoots it all with the iPad, and he edits it with the iPad right there and uploads it. So it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty good quality movie. I mean, it could be a little stabler, but it's got everything. It's got graphics. It's got transitions. And I guess he had like a real mic hooked up to the iPad, and I think he used the iRig mic, and so it looks much better. Now, one of the more remarkable things about the iPad 2 are the magnets on it, which allow the smart case to work on it. And the smart case is basically a case that's just on the front of the iPad, but can also fold back and be used as a stand. But the amazing thing about the smart case is that the smart case has magnets built into it, and the iPad 2 has magnets built into it on the left side when you look at it in portrait mode. And so the smart cover just snaps onto it, and you can snap it off really quickly, and it stays on pretty tight. And people had been speculating as to whether third-party case makers would take advantage of the magnets. And the New York Times, in its Bits column by Nick Bilton on March 25th, has an article, "Third-Party iPad 2 Cases Take on Smart Covers." And he points out that there's a number of companies, including some company in Holland named Minyote, that made a smart cover made out of wood. And I think that's selling for, I don't know, $69, which is pretty reasonable. We don't know how good it's going to be, but there's other covers that are being made. Well, let's take a look at a video which shows the this Minyote wood cover. Okay, so here is the YouTube video by Minyote, which is I guess a Dutch company, and you know, the guy's demonstrating the wood cover, and it looks really nice. It looks, you know, I shut the sound off, but basically he's saying it fits very snugly. And now he's going to demonstrate how you can fold it just like you can the Apple smart covers. Now, the Apple smart covers are made of leather or polyurethane, and this is made of wood, but obviously he's got little bendable parts. And here you can sort of roll it over, and he's showing you can use it as a landscape holding a stand that tilts at a slight angle so you can type on it, and also a portrait standing stand. So look, I think you're going to see a lot more of like stands that are going to come out that take advantage of the smart covers. And this is just the beginning. So I'm very interested in this. Now, if you haven't gotten Real Racing 2 HD and you have the iPad 2, you're really missing out on something, because Real Racing 2 HD, as I believe I discussed last week, really takes advantage of the horsepower of the iPad 2. And I pointed out last week and in some videos that I did that what's truly amazing is you can mirror Real Racing 2 HD out on a big screen and control it while you're playing it on your iPad, but you feel immersed in the experience because you're in front of a big screen TV, which is the racetrack. So now, but here's the big news. Real Racing 2 HD, the people who own it, Firement, have just announced, and they have a video on YouTube, which will show this, and I will show it to you, that it's going to support not only full 1080 out, but while it's sending the video out of the race car driving that you're doing, there's going to be a separate screen on the iPad showing something else. And so let's go and see what they did, and let's see their demo video. Okay, so let's go to the video here. And this is also on YouTube. You can go just do Google Firement and Real Racing 2 HD. So here's the cool thing. And in this demo, they're showing this. So they start the game on a big screen, but look at the iPad. The iPad has a different screen. And in the different screen, you could see the racetrack. And so on the big screen, you see yourself driving on the racetrack, but then you could look down and see the overview of the racetrack. So it's really helpful, because right now, in the way I play the game, is you've got yourself driving on the iPad and driving on the big screen, and there's like a little track in the overview of the whole track in the corner. But this has profound implications. This has profound implications for the iPad 2 and the iPad 1. And let's discuss those profound implications. Well, the profound implications are that what Firement's doing with Real Racing 2 HD is going to completely change gaming and completely change how valuable the iPad platform is going to become as a gaming platform. Because think about this. Think about how you're going to be able to, with an iPad 2, a game or a program is going to be able to send one set of data to an external screen and yet do something else completely else with another set of screen. So, you know, it's really going to just change everything. That's my take. And the type of games that we're going to then have on the iPad 2 are just going to be really at another level. Once you can have different things on different screens, you're really talking about incredible creativity. I mean, think about it. You could have I don't know, what if like also iPads could sync with each other? So one iPad could be the anchor and put like the game board on a big screen, and then other iPads that sync through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth with the main iPad could play a common game and have their own controllers on their iPad while everything goes through the big iPad onto a big screen. So what are you talking about? You're talking about board games, card games. I mean, you could have a poker game where the table is the big screen and everybody has their own hand in their iPad or iPhone. You could have, I don't know, all sorts of battling contests where you're fighting each other with creatures and stuff, and all the fighting is done on a big screen, and your iPads are controllers, and you see your own information. So this is really huge. What Firement has done with Real Racing 2 HD is just amazing. And so, I mean, we're just going to see all sorts of creativity with games and applications. Or how about the business place? I mean, you could have an iPad 2 be the anchor to a big screen, and then you could have, I don't know, documents put up on a big screen, and other people just share and see their own stuff on their iPad. Okay, now let's go to the competition that iPad is facing, you know, the iPad 2. And shortly after the launch of the iPad 2, BlackBerry announced this, I guess this past week, that pricing on the BlackBerry Playbook, which is going to be coming out, BlackBerry says it's going to be available April 19th. Now, the BlackBerry Playbook is only 7 inches, but in terms of price, they're going to be competitive with Apple on price, even though it's smaller. The 16 gigabyte Wi-Fi model is going to be $500, which is the same price as the iPad 16 gigabyte Wi-Fi model, which is $499. Now, but frankly, I got to tell you, I think BlackBerry's got to price these things less than the iPad, because if you had your choice, why would you buy the BlackBerry? Now, the only reason to buy the BlackBerry Playbook is if you're just a crazy BlackBerry RIM fanatic and never used an Apple product. You might get the Playbook, and maybe some enterprise people, a lot of enterprise Fortune 500 IT departments, they're totally locked into BlackBerry and RIM and Windows, and they might be they might be convinced that RIM knows enterprise and that the BlackBerry Playbook works well with BlackBerry devices. But anyway, so we'll have to see how this is. Remember, it's running a completely different type of operating system. BlackBerry did announce that I think you're going to be able to run some Android apps on the BlackBerry through some sort of emulation program. But there's not going to be many apps on it, so we'll have to see how that competes. Now, one of the most outrageous stories on the internet this week, outrageous, is this story about what Samsung is doing. And it's on technologizer.com and reported by a guy named Harry McCracken, who did some McCracking reporting, or crack reporting. And remember, Samsung has the Galaxy Tab already. And Samsung, this past week, announced that it's going to have like the next version of the Samsung Galaxy Tab, and that it's going to be thinner than the iPad 2, because obviously Apple's competitors feel the heat from the iPad 2 because it's thinner, the same price, faster processors. But here's the fascinating thing. This guy McCracken, he's got a story out called "Is Samsung's New Galaxy Tab Fibbing About Its Figure?" and about those Galaxy Tab fans. And this is just incredible. I mean, you wonder is this a crime? Because apparently Samsung had an event earlier this week called CTIA Wireless Event, and at this event was the representation that the Galaxy Tab is thinner and lighter. But when they got there, Mr. McCracken, he found that the 10.1-inch tabs out on the table were the older ones, and they were relatively portly versions compared to the ones that were announced last month at Mobile World Congress. And that the newer 10.1-inch Galaxy Tabs, which were supposed to be thinner than the iPad 2, were inside glass cases, and they weren't powered on. He then goes on to say he discovered that his friend had beat him to the booth and told him that he was trying to get Samsung to give him a tab so he could hold and judge it. And he did get one, and he published a roundup that includes a comparison shots of the iPad 2 and the prototype of this supposedly thinner Galaxy Tab. But the thing is, it doesn't look real. It looked like it was a fake, like a dummy. Now, then also at this event, it looked like there were these like sort of everyday people who were identified in like this like interview project video as just independent people who were interested in getting the Galaxy Tab, and they were identified as freelance travel writer Joan Hess, an independent film director Carl Scheffelman, and a CEO leading New York State real estate firm Joseph Kolinsky. Now, McCracken goes on to say that as he watched the interviews, he noticed that this guy Scheffelman spoke and behaved more or less like a normal person, but Hess and Kolinsky came off as performers dressed for their parts and parroting Samsung's talking points. McCracken goes on to say he couldn't tell whether we were supposed to take the clips as a documentary or a mockumentary. McCracken then Googled around and couldn't find any references to a travel writing Joan Hess, one with, as she said, a following on Twitter, or a real estate person named Joseph Kolinsky. But he did notice that the freelance travel writer Joan Hess bears a striking resemblance to New York actress Joan Hess, and the real estate CEO Joseph Kolinsky could be the New York actor Joseph Kolinsky's twin brother. So basically what McCracken is saying is that Samsung hired actors to make it look like they were interested in the Samsung products. And as for the filmmaker, he then discovers, the filmmaker Carl Scheffelman is a filmmaker who just happens to work for a New York production company, one that has done work for Samsung. So basically he's suggesting that the whole thing is a sham, that Samsung had hired actors to pretend to be people really interested in the thing. So this sort of went all crazy on the internet, and then he followed up on this. So the plot thickens. So McCracken's article was on Friday. On Saturday, he's got another article as a follow-up, and he says, Samsung's fake Galaxy Tab interviews, hey, those words sound familiar. And he then goes on to say the reason they're familiar because they're McCracken's own words, and here's where it gets really funny. And talk about goofing up by some corporation. So McCracken says, when I watched the video interviews with 3 true, quote, true-life Galaxy Tab users that Samsung showed at its CTIA event, I was observant enough to figure out, with the help of about 6 minutes of Google research, that 2 of the users were actors, and the other one works for a film production company that counts Samsung among its clients. But I didn't notice or detail every oddity about the then folks who were discussing my story on all of this. But in the comments and elsewhere on the web, people are having fun pointing out other curious things about the interviews, such as the fact that the leading New York real estate CEO, Joseph Kolinsky, raves about the 8.9-inch Galaxy Tab, even though the only 8.9-inch tabs that Samsung itself had on hand were non-working models. So that's pretty funny. Then Phil Earnhardt watched the YouTube version of the CTIE event very carefully. The interviews open with a fake magazine covers about the interview subjects, which open to simulated magazine spreads on the subjects. The pages flip by in a jiffy, he says, McCracken. By Phil was apparently interested enough to hit pause and zoom in so he could read the text on the real estate CEO interview. As numerous people have noticed, it identifies him as Joseph Korinsky, even though he's called Joseph Kolinsky elsewhere and seemed to be played by an actor named Joseph Kolinsky. So in this supposed interview, Samsung even has the name misspelled. So McCracken's friend Phil even figured out that the text was lifted from a review of the original Galaxy Tab, one that wasn't glowing, for instance. The text that Samsung's video producers lifted say that the tab is, quote, nowhere near as polished and complete, end quote, as the original iPad. When Phil quoted the review, it sounded familiar, and this is the funniest part. It sounded familiar, McCracken says, as well it should have, because McCracken wrote it. It's the piece that McCracken did for the Time magazine last November, which he called, and then he shows the clip of his article from last November, called Samsung's Galaxy Tab, the Anti-iPad. And then McCracken says the business magazine that interviewed the supposed Korinsky guy had a Time-like red ribbon around its cover. Perhaps whoever was responsible for mocking it up decided that it would be appropriate to borrow words from Time to fill it in. So McCracken says he's amused by this twist, but now he's befuddled more than ever. Let's see. Neither Joseph Kolinsky nor Joseph Korinsky is a real leading New York real estate tycoon, but Joseph Kolinsky is a real successful New York actor. And while the words in his magazine interview text aren't his own, they are real. It's just that they're mine. So this is hilarious. So what we're seeing is it looks like Apple's one of its biggest competitors, Samsung, is like maybe created this whole sham like fake interview to sort of fool people into believing that the Samsung 2 or the Galaxy Tab is going to be thinner and better, and it's really kind of crazy. Okay, so while Samsung is going about, going to all sorts of lengths to try to fool people that it's coming Samsung Tab, the second revision is going to be better than the iPad, and it looks like they're hiring fake people. It looks like there's a great article in The Guardian, which is a major English paper. I read this article. It really tells you how powerful the iPad 2 is. And the title of the article is How the iPad Revolution Has Transformed Working Lives. And this is really part of what I've been saying about the enterprise. And the enterprise isn't just Fortune 500 companies or major government entities. It's also everyday people. And this article by Charles Arthur and Killian Fox really highlights how the iPad has really changed everyday people's lives. And there's really great stuff in this article. Now, the Observer article is very lengthy, but as I pointed out in my blog, there's a particular passage that I think is profound. And this is what the Guardian says. We have lived with the PC paradigm for around 30 years now, since IBM introduced its first personal computers and pushed them into businesses in the early 1980s. Until the launch of the iPad last year, the only comparable change in the market had been the laptop, which led to the emergence of an army of traveling salespeople whose most urgent need was always to find a PowerPoint where they could charge their machine's fading battery. The iPad seems to be different, a third stage of computing. Horace Dedew, a former analyst with the mobile phone company Nokia, who now runs his own consultancy, S-Simco, argues that, quote, the definition of a new generation of computing is that the new products rely on new input and output methods and allow a new population of non-expert users to use the product more cheaply and simply. And as I point out, The Guardian gives examples of how several people use the iPad in their businesses, including a teacher, a painter, a musician, DJ, a physicist, and a businesswoman who I guess is in development. But that's a really profound point, and I think The Guardian totally captures it in their article. I urge you to go read it, because the point with the iPad is it's transformative. It's so light, it's so easy to travel around, and this input method through touch really changes it. Okay, so now let me give you an example of how the iPad, particularly the iPad 2, is becoming useful for professionals left and right. Now, previously I talked about an app that attorneys, particularly trial attorneys, can use called Evidence by RLTC. This is a simple $10 program that allows an attorney at trial to load their iPad with exhibits and then project them on a big screen using a cable out to a projector or a connection out to a big plasma or LCD TV. Now, basically, there are now 3 iPad apps that compete in this space. And I bought recently the third one that just came out called Exhibit A. So there's an Exhibit A app which costs only $10, and this Evidence app by RLTC which costs $10, and then a third which I haven't tried out which costs $89.99 called TrialPad by Surian. And Exhibit A is by an outfit called Lectura LLC. And you know what? You could use this even if you're not an attorney. This app, Exhibit A, is useful, or the Exhibit one, for anybody making presentations beyond like a keynote or PowerPoint presentation. If you have a lot of documents and you want to hook them up to a projector, and you don't want to just mirror out what's on the iPad. You want to be able to show something on screen, on a screen somewhere else, while you're loading up the next exhibit or document that you want to show. This is a great app. So this is also good for business meetings, because the problem with just mirroring out what's on your screen is people can see what your next document is that you're going to roll out. So the 3 apps that have come out in the last few months are specifically geared to exhibit presentation at trial. Like I said, it's the Evidence app by RLTC, the TrialPad app by Surian, which is $89.99, and this Exhibit A. Now, Exhibit A can do the following. It can show PDF exhibits and picture exhibits in picture formats compatible with the iPad. It can also play audio and video files that are comparable with the iPad, such as MPEG-4 files. You can show an exhibit and line up a second exhibit while the first one is still showing, or you can hide the exhibit you showed, go to a black screen, and then show the next exhibit. The scrolling function works through multi-page exhibits, particularly text-denominated PDF files, and it's very fast. I ran tests on the iPad 2, which is a much faster processor than the original iPad, but anyone using such apps professionally should consider getting the iPad 2. Now, also with Exhibit A, you have a very convenient way to rotate individual pages of an exhibit, as the rotate function quickly shows you a view of all 4 rotation views, so you don't have to guess which to choose to have the proper view. In addition, you have various ways to call out sections of an exhibit. The most fun way, and the closest to a call out on programs that work on desktops, is to just pinch your fingers to zoom in and out. Now, on the desktop programs or laptop programs, the most prominent ones are these very expensive programs called Sanction on Windows and Trial Director. You use a mouse to zoom in or to do a call out. But with the iPad, you essentially use your fingers to blow up the parts of the exhibit that you want to zoom in on. You also have a pen tool in Exhibit A in several different colors to highlight or mark up the exhibit. So the app also gives you a highlighter, which is like a yellow pen highlighter. And you're doing this all with your finger. Now, one thing that the Evidence app has, which Exhibit A does not have, is a rectangular block highlighter. So in the Evidence app, you just drag your finger over some part of the exhibit, like text, and the rectangle block just blocks it off into a highlight, which is a lot quicker than if your finger was a highlighting pen. You have to sort of go over each line. Now, you also have, what I liked about Exhibit A is you have the ability to add files and documents to the app through 5 different methods. And I think all apps on the iPad should really look at Exhibit A and think about like how you can really expand the many different ways that you can add content to your app. So here are the 5 ways that Exhibit A does it. FTP transfer. Now this is the best way, FTP transfer. You just need a program on your Windows or Mac computer that does an FTP transfer, and you can transfer huge amounts of like files over to the Exhibit A app. Number 2, browser transfer through a computer and iPad being on the same Wi-Fi network. Exhibit A does what a lot of programs on the iPad do, which is they can transfer data back and forth from a computer by being on the common Wi-Fi network, and then the program like Exhibit A will give you a router number, like 192.80.0.8080, and you put that IP address in your browser on your computer, and you can literally browse to the files on your iPad and transfer documents or files back and forth. Another way, which is a common way for all apps, is by emailing the iPad and adding the file to the app through the email function when you're transferring stuff to apps. And a lot of apps do that also. The 4th way, which is very common, is through the iTunes app syncing. Remember, when you hook up the iPad to iTunes, it appears on the left side in the dock, and if you go to apps, when it's synced in under apps, you'll see that certain apps which have that feature activated allow you to go through iTunes and use the iTunes to look on your on your computer and transfer files to and through the app. Now, the 5th way, which is really coolest, and I think a lot of apps are going to, is something I mentioned before, which is linking to Dropbox's cloud service. So this app is great because it says, give us your Dropbox account password, and boom, from within the app you can go and load documents or files into Exhibit A. So it's very cool. But the best way really is the FTP transfer, because only the FTP transfer appears in Exhibit A, allows you to transfer hundreds of files in one swoop. The other ones, I think you have to do it piecemeal. Now, one great feature that Exhibit A has, which the Evidence app doesn't have, is the ability to create distinct projects and folders and subfolders within each project. This is great for making a litigation a separate project and then creating folders in that project for different witnesses or different groups of exhibits. But even if you're not a lawyer, this would be great. Let's say you have different presentations for different customers. So you could use Exhibit A and create a folder for customer A and a folder for customer B, and have the stuff that you want for each customer in different folders. So it's very clever use of the folder structure on the iPad, which a lot of apps don't do. Now, the main way for Exhibit A to display to an external monitor is through Apple's VGA connector. Apple has an HDMI connector, which has an advantage over VGA connectors, as it can display high-resolution video and also play audio through one connection. But I tested the HDMI connection with Exhibit A, and it seemed to be problematic as it didn't show the entire exhibit on the external display. Also, here's something else that's really cool. Exhibit A just announced that its recent update, now supports playing video on an external monitor through Apple's AirPlay feature. This would allow you to bring an Apple TV, the latest model, the $99 model, into a courtroom along with the Apple, or a conference or a presentation room, along with an Apple Express Wi-Fi router, and through the Wi-Fi network you could transmit video to a big screen. Now, unfortunately, as the Exhibit A developer points out in the notes for the new release, Apple's AirPlay does not yet support showing documents. Thus, the AirPlay feature is only good for showing video and playing audio. Now, if Apple upgrades AirPlay to show all iPad screen content so that it can be shown on an external monitor, the implications are profound. You would be able to use an app like Exhibit A with no connecting cable to the iPad. You could wander around the courtroom or a conference room and fling exhibits to the big screen from your iPad while talking to a jury or talking to conference attendees or examining a witness. So overall, my general impressions of Exhibit A is that it's robust and has a lot of features that don't come in the Evidence app, and many of the features that come in the TrialPad app it has, but it's only a fraction of the cost of the TrialPad app. Now, while some claim that the iPad app can't compete with enterprise-level PC programs like Sanction and Trial, I think the strength of an iPad app like Exhibit A can make up for whatever weaknesses it has compared to the PC programs. So what are the strengths that such an iPad app has as an exhibit displayer? The iPad can be the iPad can be controlled and used by the actual attorney or presenter conducting the argument or conference. The iPad is just over 1 pound in weight and is super thin. Plus, it is a touchscreen device, so there's no lid propped up at 90 degrees. When you're making a presentation, having the lid popped up at 90 degrees really sort of hinders the ambiance of how you're doing it. As such, you could hold it as you conduct your argument or question a witness, and it looks like a notebook pad. The point is, it is unobtrusive. Well, right now you have to connect it by a VGA display to an external display. Its size and weight still allows you the ability to move around while you pick exhibits and call them out. All you need is an extra long cable. A second point why this is good is because it is touch. Your callouts and use of a whiteboard looks much more natural than using a computer with a mouse or a limited touchpad. On the Exhibit A app, you can choose several different colors of a pen tool and adjust the pen's thickness. With this tool, you can circle key parts of the electronic exhibits as you talk. The jury will see you circling something with your finger, which looks much more natural. Similarly, as you read key parts of a transcript or a document exhibit, you can follow along with your finger, which controls a light pointing tool, which gives the appearance on the display that you're aiming a light pointer at the screen to emphasize key parts of the electronic exhibits. You also have a highlighter marker, which can highlight words or parts of an exhibit. My third point is that with the iPad, you can turn around and show the iPad with the key exhibit on it to emphasize a particularly damning electronic document. This would be great during a trial when you're before a jury, because in other words, you would have it on the big display, but also you would have it on your iPad. And so if you really wanted to emphasize how great a document is, you would just hold up the iPad and say, look at this document in my hand, while it's also on the big screen. So, overall, I think whether you're a trial attorney or somebody making presentations at conferences, I think this $10 app is really cool. This Exhibit A app, and I would, if you're doing any sort of presentations, I would consider getting it. Okay, so another app that I want to recommend is a $2 app, and it's technically just an iPhone app, but it works really well on the iPad. It is called Everyday, and it was inspired by some guy named Noah on YouTube, who did sort of time-stop photography of his face. And really, the app is designed to take a picture of your face every day, and then the pictures are stored, and then over a long period of time, it creates a movie about how your face changes over a long period of time. And what's great about the app now with the iPad 2 is you have cameras in the front and the back. And the app also works on the iPhone. But what's really cool about the app is that, it stores the photos in the app. You can there is a setting I'll show you later where you can activate by default, so it also saves the movies in iPhoto. But you don't want that because you're going to be taking a lot of photos. And basically, it's a way to make sort of these cool videos of your face changing quickly over time. So let me right here show you just a quick video of how that is being done on YouTube. This guy Noah did it, and it's kind of inspiring. Okay, so to give you an idea of what the app can do, it's inspired by this video, and I guess this guy had something to do with the app, and his name is Noah. And so basically he took a picture of himself every day for 6 years and then combined it into a video that just shows him, over time changing. So this is what the concept is of the app. So you could end up with this cool feature. But here's the cool thing about the app, and is that you don't have to just take pictures of your face, because it works with both the front and back camera. So here I have an image of looking through the app on the iPad and looking out through the back camera at a microphone. But what's nice about the app, if you want to take a picture of your face every day, is that it helps you line it up with your nose and your eyes and your mouth to be in the same place every day. So it's got really, good features. But the cool thing is you can also use it to take pictures on the outside, and I'll get to why you might want to do that later. But the features are kind of cool. Like you can see here that you can see all the photos that you took, and you've got like a little camera, and you press the camera, and that lines up taking the picture. You've got various settings. You can have your Twitter account, your Tumblr account, your Flickr account, and your Facebook account integrated into it, so you could send your movie to those services. And plus, there are reminders that you can have it launch reminders like every day to take a picture, and you can turn off auto saving to photos if you want. So it's got a lot of features. Now the cool thing is you can generate within the app the video and see what it's like before you save it to your camera roll. You can also change the video speeds. Like there's different video speeds: slow, normal, and fast. But here's the cool thing. Like you can use it to do something very different than taking your face. So the reason I really like Everyday on the iPad, and remember it's just an iPhone app, so it has to expand out 2x mode. It's not a native iPad app. But it works fantastic on the iPad. And the reason I like it on the iPad actually better than on the iPhone is because the iPad with the smart cover, it just can stand up on its own, and you can just leave it there, and you don't have to hold it, and you can take your picture. Now, here's where it gets really cool, because I started playing around with it, and every day is it actually, you could turn it into a stop action animation player. Stop action animation camera is the one like where you take like individual shots of things, not just your face, and then you can make little objects move around. And so I played around with this, and I'm going to show you this video here, and I'll play it over again several times. But basically, I fooled around with this app, and I was able to move an iPod around and make it look like it's dancing around. So here it is. I'll play it over and over again, but basically in a matter of, I don't know, I took maybe 20, 30 shots, and the iPod's moving around. So with the iPad app, you can prop the iPad, and it's this beautiful big screen, and you can use this to do stop animation videos. So if you've got a kid, you can use this $2 app to, like, I don't know, take Lego figures and have them, move around. So here's the video. And if you were listening to the audio portion of this podcast, I'm going to put it up on the maxfuture.com blog, and you can check it out there. It's pretty cool. Okay, one bit of housekeeping, which is that if you haven't done it already, you should consider upgrading to iOS 4.3.1 on your iPad, because that came out this past Friday on the 25th. And the update contains improvements. I'm looking at the MacRumors.com website, and other bug fixes, including, here's the things that it cleans up: fixes an occasional graphics glitch on iPod Touch, well, that's not related to the iPad, resolves bugs related to activating and connecting to some cellular networks that could affect the 3G iPads, fixes image flicker when using Apple Digital AV adapter with some TVs, that affects the iPad, and resolves an issue authenticating with some enterprise web services, and that could affect the iPad. Now, people are reporting that with the iPhone, at least, it's extending battery life. Apparently, the last version of the iOS caused some people to notice that the battery life was going quicker. And then I'm going to see if with the iPad it extends the battery life. So you should update if you haven't done so already. Okay, so one of my final stories, I don't know if it's an urban myth. It's a story that was I saw on maxrumor.com entitled "iPad, Wife Says No, but Apple Says Yes." And supposedly some guy bought the iPad 2 and had to return it to the Apple store because his wife said no. I guess, she just didn't think they should buy it. Now, supposedly, according to this story, Apple vice presidents got wind of the return and sent it back to him with the sticker, "Apple Says Yes." The story implies that the iPad 2 was given to the guy for free after he returned it. Now, I think it sounds incredible, but I hope it's true. I mean, that would be really cool, but I can't imagine anybody would go through the trouble of buying the iPad 2 when it's so hard to get and still would return it. I guess that shows how powerful wives can be. Now, the next story is a wife story in the iPad, or a soon-to-be wife story in the iPad, and it's also kind of incredible or kind of magical. And it's on 9to5mac.com, and the article is entitled, "Yes, Now Give Me My iPad." And here's what happened. According to the article, someone named Jordan C. wrote to 9to5.mac to let them know how magical the iPad really is. Apparently, this guy Jordan purchased an iPad 2 and engraved "Will you marry me" on it. I guess, Apple gives you that engraving option on the iPad. And so he did this for his then girlfriend Jessica. And so this is what 9to5.mac reported that Jordan said. He said, "I just wanted to share my excitement for Apple's latest magical device, bringing a little magic into my life. I stayed up all night to order my iPad with the inscription, 'Will you marry me?' Received mine this Monday, took my then girlfriend Jessica up to the National Redwood Forest in Northern California. After having to cross a river on a downed redwood and dealing with the intermittent rain, I found the largest tree in the world. I kneeled down and gave it my best. Whether it was something I said or Apple's magic in action, she gushed out and said, 'Yes, now give me my iPad.'" So then there's a picture of Jessica holding, looks like a white iPad. So that's, it's a really nice story, and who knows if that's an urban legend or an urban myth, or if it really went down that way. But hopefully it did go down that way, because it's kind of romantic. Okay, so finally I want to end this week's podcast on the iPad with a really nice article on a website called 90wpm.com. It looks like it's a Tumblr website. But it's a review of GarageBand by this individual. And here's what's really interesting, and what he says that's really interesting. And remember, GarageBand is just amazing on the iPad 2. You can also play it on the regular iPad, but it really rocks on the iPad 2 because all that horsepower really makes it work. And this is what he says: "I am an iPhone junkie, and until recently, I had little to no use for the iPad. Thankfully, I'm not required to check mail on my mobile devices. I'm at my laptop for most of the day, and on the subway, I usually stick to Reader, Instapaper, and New York Times on my iPhone 4, since after using the Retina display, the iPad just feels cheaper than newsprint with its measly 132 dpi screen. Then Apple released GarageBand. My iPad is now a guitar, piano, synthesizer, drum kit, and track editor all in one. It's like walking through Sam Ash with Steve Jobs' Amex. I can hook in a mic and whatever instruments I want. I could compose an album while sipping mojitos in a chaise lounge in Cozumel. And then he goes on. It's a very comprehensive review. Now, for those of you who don't know, Sam Ash is a professional electronic music store. If you want to get electronic instruments like real keyboards, real electric guitars, Sam Ash, which is based in New York and has stores around the country, is where you go. So his line, it's like walking through Sam Ash with Steve Jobs' Amex, is basically saying that Steve Jobs has taken all these real instruments and delivered them to you for free in the iPad 2. Now, he isn't, it's not like he is not critical at all. He does have quibbles with the GarageBand. Two quibbles worth mentioning. He says, first, there is undo but no redo, but then he says, there is a redo. If you hold undo, it will change to redo. Also, playing anything more complicated than a simple beat or riff on the built-in instruments will be next to impossible unless you turn off multitasking gestures in the Settings app under the General tab. Now, that's a good trick because if you put on multitasking gestures, he points out that he couldn't figure out why his iPad was switching to the App Store until he realized that banging on the keyboard with 4 fingers was causing the OS to switch to the next open app. Also, he says recording is reasonably fast on his first generation iPad 3G, though adjusting the playhead after adding a few tracks is maddeningly slow. Songs can be viewed as isolated sections or at once. The app felt a bit slower when he viewed all tracks at once, and the playhead moves over the whole duration, which makes him think that the software is loading the entire RAM preview every time. So then he goes on to say, I can only hope this is much, much better on iPad 2. So he was using it on the first generation iPad. But you should check out the whole review. It's very comprehensive. It's at 90wpm.com. And, it's really worthwhile. Okay, so that's it for episode 47 of the iPad podcast by MaxFuture.com. This is Lex. Again, if you have any questions, you can email me at maxfuture@gmail.com or leave me a voicemail at 617-826-9676. And also, remember, I have the video version of this podcast and also the Apple podcast at Apple Things on iTunes. So if you search for Apple Things by Max Future, you'll find the video versions of this. And I'm also starting to put these video versions up on YouTube, where you can go to the YouTube/Max Future channel. Also, Blip TV has the video versions of these podcasts at maxfuture.bliptv.com. So you can find them in many different places. Again, thanks for listening, and see you next week.